So when I first started my my business 32 odd years ago, this is the type of machine I started with, just a completely manual machine. So we had no CNC at the time, or I didn't have the money to buy in CNCs at the time. And these, you learn how to use these handle winding machines, basically we call it. So it's handle winding, and then we evolved into the button pushing. So it's always a bit of a running commentary against, you know, the handle winders versus the button pushers. But there's a lot of skill involved in using a machine like this. It sort of, you get the feel of how a insert is performing on the job. You can feel how much pressure is to push a tool, and you can adjust manually, you know, to get the swarf to come off or chip. Sometimes you like the swarf to chip, but then it ends up flying in your face because there's no guards on the thing, and then sometimes you don't like it to go stringy because it all wraps around the job and causes you problems. So you're always chasing that thing, and sometimes manual machines can be quicker than setting up on a CNC if you're doing a very simple task like just one diameter, no radiuses or chamfers or small chamfers. Even the skilled operators, they can actually even generate a chamfer by winding two handles simultaneously, and they have the feel to generate a 45-degree chamfer or even a radius, depending on how expert they are or how good they've got the feel of the machine. Then that sort of, from using the dials on the cross slide and the saddle, evolved into having a digital readout. So you have readout scales now on pretty much all the machines. So that sort of does away from having to count how many turns you've got, because one turn of these on this machine is, on the cross slide, is 5 mil. So you kind of know when you put a cut on, if you're either cutting, you put a 2.5 mil depth of cut or a 5 mil depth of cut or a full 5. So you sort of count. Previously you used to count how many times to get to diameter. But now you kind of use the digital readout, which actually, when positioning, is probably a slower, especially if you're cutting threads, is a slower way of doing it, because you're sort of chasing those microns to get. But whereas using the dial, sometimes you just wind it to the number and you put your next cut on, or your point, whatever increments you're doing for cutting your thread. These machines are better for chasing a thread. So if you've got a thread that the customer wants to make it a bit more loose, or it's damaged and you want to re-chase the thread, these machines are a lot more helpful than a CNC. You do have CNCs that have phase matching, so you can stop the spindle, line the tool up, phase match the program, and then start cutting your threads. But if you've got a simple little thread or one or two jobs, it's probably just easier to do it on a machine like this. So that's the turning side of things, and the milling is the same. When I first started, all the milling work that I used to do was done on a manual machine like this. I kept it a lot cleaner than this, but so these machines are still in my shop, but only for very small. They hardly ever get used and hardly ever get cleaned as well. So, but moving on, when I probably about 5 years into my business, I bought my first CNC machine, and it was actually a Colchester, and it was a semi-CNC, so you could use it as a manual machine almost. It had encoders on the hand wheels, but you started to lose the feel of putting a cut on, or because there's no feedback through the screws. It was just purely electronic, and they didn't offer any feedback. So that was a bit of a learning curve, how to use the machine like that. But then you start to realise the benefits of having a CNC when you're doing radiuses and special shapes and that sort of thing. It just made it so much easier. And then when I bought that sort of intermediate machine, I kind of wished that I hadn't, and I just should have gone for a full CNC. But at the time, didn't have the money, or was a bit frightened to do so. So after that, I just bought my machines with just full CNCs, and then you range in price from like a 3-axis machine, which you start going, and then you're generating curves, but then you go to 5-axis, and then multi-tools, and carousels and that sort of thing. So now if I buy a machine, it's kind of, I try and have everything included, and because generally as soon as the machine lands and you take it out of the box, your first job is either too small or too complicated, as a rule, and you sort of wish I had bought that option or this option sort of thing. So and they're getting expensive. So I can show you some of the machines now that we have in the shop. I also find that coming from a manual machining background, you get a sense of the sounds that the machine can make when it's cutting material, so I can generally hear if something's not cutting right, even if a machine is running. You can sense sometimes that the tool is going blunt, or the machine is starting to work a bit harder than it should be, and that's when it's a fast sprint to the machine to reset it or turn it off if something's going wrong. And so some of the apprentices that come through, they don't understand that noise that's coming from the machine. They think everything's all sweet, but I come running out of my office and go, turn that machine off because it doesn't sound right, and they kind of look at me blankly and wondering how I know from the other end of the shop. But they're learning. They start to understand. You start to see how the machine is performing. These machines now have load monitoring on them, so if you set the loads on the machine, you can walk away and be safe that you're not going to damage anything. Because the machine will cut off or send a warning. This is one of the similar machines that I bought, my first vertical machining centre. Obviously the new controllers now, the controller back then was quite different. It had floppy disk drives, which the 3 1/4 inch floppy disks, or 3 1/2s, whatever they were, and you had to change the disk out. And we used to have libraries of disks and of programs that we've generated, and if you didn't label them correctly, you're always fighting to find it, and it was difficult and slow. Now they're all internal memories, and they've got plenty of capacity in there. The tool changes. You have a bigger library of tools now. So it becomes, things start to become easier, and repeatability is the main thing with these as well. So if you've got a quantity of stuff that you can do, this is obviously a turning job, so you can tell by the threading. It's just neat and easy to generate these sorts of things rather than trying to do that on a manual machine. This is one of my early machines that's still in the shop, still very good and still making making swarf. These machines at Kuma are quite robust. If you look after them and keep them maintained, this thing's been going for 20 odd years. This used to have the floppy disk drive, but then they had an upgrade where you can use a thumb drive, but it was still in the floppy disk format. It's only whatever 1.8 megabyte partitions, I think, and you still have to cycle through as though it was in. If you can see here, so that's disk 83, and if you want to change the disks, or supposedly everything's on that little thumb drive, but you select the disk and you have a printout of what happens to be in that partition. So it's still slow, just so you don't have disks lying around everywhere. Then we go into our 5-axis turning. This is twin turret with a tailstock. This turret can also handle you can put an attachment for a steady. So this is the first 5-axis turning machine that I bought. And then I enjoyed it so much I bought another 2. So I've got every variation now. I've got sub spindles and double turrets on these, and when these are set up, they can do excellent work and very quickly. Moving through the shop, these are our MU8000s. As you can see, everything's a Kuma in here, pretty much. This has been a wonderful machine, really. It's just getting around 5 sides of a part, and a fairly large part as well, has been. When I first bought these machines, I actually didn't have any work for them. I did a tour. Kuma took me to their factory in Japan, and I saw one of these being built, and I said I want one. And they actually didn't believe me. They thought I was joking. Yeah, this type of machine finds its own work. You know, the customers around town, once they realise you got this type of machine, you're capable of doing the work that they want and quickly, rather than just using conventional 3-axis machines. That makes a huge difference. This component was actually, this used to be welded together, like it just fabricated, you know, with webs and all welds up here, and welded this block on and weld these parts. And we decided, rather than wasting or running around doing that, we'll make it out of one solid piece, one billet. It's a better looking job. The customer's happy with it. They're happy with the price that we can do it for, as opposed to fabricating it. And because the machine is just so capable of doing those sorts of shapes. We also got deep hole drilling, which kind of has just sat here since I've bought it. I bought this machine for a customer that we were doing work for. Unfortunately, that customer was sold to a Chinese company, and they took all the work overseas. So that transition was while this machine was arriving. So, but the times that we have used it have been quite helpful. It's just that we haven't at this stage advertise that we do have this capability. And yeah, that's about all I can show you at the moment.